What's up, everybody? It's Scott Johnson, physical therapist at PhysioFIT. I'm here with Dr. Phil Batterson, Ph.D. I just wanted to have a little bit of a chat and give you guys an introduction to him. He's going to be in the clinic here and there doing some physiologic testing. With no further ado, Dr. Phil, give us a little bit of background on you.
Yeah.
How'd you get into exercise physiology? What's your education?
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Scott, and thanks for kind of connecting, through some mutual friends and those sort of things, and allowing me to do some work at the Performance Collective. I really am looking forward to it. So my name is Dr. Phil Batterson. I have a PhD in exercise physiology. During my PhD, I really focused on a little bit more molecular mechanisms of why things like overweight, obesity, or eating too much and exercise. So eating too much is bad for us, and why exercise is actually good for us. So that's kind of in a nutshell what I studied. My interest for all of this exercise physiology stuff actually stems from high school, where I was a middle of the road, sort of cross country runner and track runner, and I was always looking for those things that could kind of give me an edge. So through some exploration and other things like that, I wound up in my master's degree, and I started doing this stuff called physiological testing, where if you've ever seen anybody, or like a runner or a cyclist in a lab wearing like the mask covering their face, or poking their finger and drawing blood and doing other things like that, that's like what I was doing with individuals who were all the way to Olympians, all the way down to people who are relatively sedentary. So I've slowly over the course of time gained a massive appreciation for what this testing can actually do for us, and how it can actually allow us to train more effectively and more optimally. Whether you're a runner, a mountain biker, a road cyclist, triathlete, literally like any endurance athlete. And then I was working with you and Michael from the clinic, and you guys are primarily CrossFit athletes. And we did testing with you too, and I think that was also beneficial for those longer pieces and those longer sets when you were doing intervals and other things like that.
For sure. And that's something we'll hopefully get into. We hope that this is an ongoing conversation to share with everybody for both parties. So who do you think who can benefit from this?
Yeah, I mean,
Well, maybe we start. Can you give me a high level of like what physiologic testing is?
Yeah, that's a perfect place to start. So I would say, very, very simply stated, what physiological testing is you do an exercise test starting at really low exercise intensities, progressing through higher and higher exercise intensities until you reach failure. Is that kind of what you're going for?
And then this is done running, biking, rowing.
The great thing about what I do is that I have a portable physiology lab that can be used for running indoor, outdoor, cycling indoor, outdoor. I haven't done any rowing outdoor, but you could do it on a rowing machine as well. And the big key is that you can do any modality that you're training for. You just need to go from low exercise intensity to high exercise intensity, or maximal exercise intensity. You'll hear these tests called VO2 max tests, but that's just, and a VO2 max is what your body's aerobic engine, how big your aerobic engine is. Are you using a Toyota Prius, or do you have like a V12, like Chevy or like Corvette or something along those lines, right? So your VO2 max kind of sets the top end limit of what your aerobic engine is, but there's also a couple important turning points or physiological points that we can measure with this physiological testing. That's why I don't call it a VO2 max test, because VO2 max test kind of implies, we're just getting one point of information, which is VO2 max. VO2 max is extremely important. If any of your clients have listened to Peter Attia or Huberman or anybody like that, VO2 max is one of the best predictors of longevity and health, and risk of cardiovascular disease and other things like that. So the higher it is, the better. But what just focusing on VO2 max fails to kind of take into account is that there's also two thresholds, your first threshold and your second threshold, that also kind of tell us what's going on in your body and how your body is coping with the exercise intensities that are going on. So first threshold is essentially where you are burning the most amount of fat. So when you're exercising, I don't know about you guys, but for me, sometimes I want to target a little bit of, say, fat loss or something along those lines. And, this isn't perfect science, but you're burning the most amount of fat at your first threshold. So if you exercise at first threshold, then you're going to be stimulating the most amount of fat that you possibly can be burning. Second threshold is the threshold where exercise intensity goes from something that you could probably sustain for, maybe an hour at the most, to if you go any exercise intensity over that, you're going to start to feel kind of like the burning in your legs. You're going to run the risk of getting tired and fatigued. So that second threshold is really, really important, because if you're doing a 5K race, a 10K race, an hour-long race, a half marathon, any of those things that are between probably 45 minutes and an hour and a half, that second threshold is going to be really, really, really important for the performance outcome of whatever race you are doing. And by getting a picture of your first, second threshold, and then your VO2 max, we can actually start to get an athlete profile, or just a profile of you. What's your physiological profile? How does your body respond to exercise intensities? And then I can actually tell you essentially the shape of your athletic house, where if the roof would be your VO2 max, your second floor is your second threshold, and then your bottom floor is your first threshold. And if any one of those floors is kind of butting up against each other or limiting the movement of another floor, then we have to improve that. So I was just telling you, Scott, the other day, it's like, well, I've had people in the past come in, their VO2 max is really low, but their second threshold is high and their first threshold is high because they do a lot of low intensity work. But if we wanted to improve that person's performance, we would need to improve how tall their house is, so their VO2 max first, before we could raise their second threshold and their first threshold afterwards. So the bottom line
basically answered my question.
Yeah.
Next question is gonna be like, do we want a big one or do we want a wide one?
Yeah. And the answer is it depends, right? It depends on what your goals are, where you are in the season, and what is limiting your house from being as optimal as possible. Because nobody likes to have, a second floor that's only 2 feet tall, right? So that's like kind of the bottom line is for me, I take in the picture of, well, what do you do in your current training? What does your physiological house look like from this physiological testing? And then where are you in the season and what are your goals? And then you can kind of, sort this puzzle out to say, oh, it makes the most sense for you to target this at this moment in time. And the awesome thing about me being associated with you is that then people can get retested after we do an intervention. So 4 to 6 weeks, maybe 8 weeks, if we're really kind of pushing it out a little bit. And then we can see, okay, well, how much did your house improve?
Sure. Cool. That was even more high level, a little bit more lower level than I was expecting. So appreciate it.
Yeah.
A little more depth there. So in general, who can benefit from testing? Is this just elite athletes? Is this just like only like high level runners? What do you see as like a use case for physiologic testing?
I honestly think anybody who doesn't want to waste their time, doing extra training, and I say extra training by spinning your wheels. I see a lot of people who are like, oh, well, I train by my Garmin watch, and your Garmin watch only will figure out your training zones from like your age and typically like a few workouts that you've done, whereas physiological testing gives you the whole range of what your zone should be. That's another benefit of it, is you figure out what your training zones are based on your first, second threshold, and then your VO2 max. So really anyone who works out, honestly, and uses
Sure.
some level of intensity, control, like if you use heart rate, if you use speed, if you use power, if you're interested in improving your performance or your health, you can stand to benefit from this. And the great thing is that this stuff is now accessible, which I think in the past it really hasn't been. You would have to, call up university, see if they can get you in. Most of the time, the cost is pretty prohibitive. And there's not much flexibility in terms of, what test you're doing, what apparatus you're doing it on, in those sort of things. So, whether you're a serious runner who's done VO2 max tests in the past, or somebody who is like, I just run for health, or I work out for health. Again, we know that having a higher VO2 max is beneficial, but if you only work on VO2 max, you're also missing out on other portions of your fitness as well. So you have to know, again, what thing to target at what times of the year. So it really gives you a nicely kind of like, it can give you a nicely defined way forward.
Right. Cool. So that sounds more like endurance athletes. We see quite a few clients that are in the CrossFit functional fitness space. What's like a quick take home for that crowd? How can physiologic testing help them get better and maybe perform better and or maybe not get injured?
Yeah. So this is exactly how we used it with you and Michael, from the clinic is, we did VO2 max tests or physiological testing, a VO2 max test on both you and Michael before and after an 8-week block.
We did an 8-week block.
Yeah. And, in that 8-week block, we defined, what the purpose of each workout was. So this is a VO2 max workout. And then we had the intensity that you guys were to target during that VO2 max block to develop VO2 max. We had a threshold workout or second threshold workout to improve your second threshold. And then we had an intensity for you guys to target. So it really, as opposed to just going into your CrossFit gym and just like doing the WOD and being like, I'm just going to go all out every single day, it gives you a target to hit where like say if it's 20 to 40 minutes, you're going to be aiming for probably second threshold heart rate. Whereas if you're doing something that's shorter than that, you're probably going to be aiming for more VO2 max intensity.
Sure.
And so it gives you the ability to know what the intensity you're supposed to be hitting and not be sending it full send every single time you go into the gym, because as you and I know, and as probably most of the people who are coming to the PT clinic know, if you're sending it full send every single day, you are definitely elevating your risk of developing overuse injuries or, doing something where you're going to be doing heavy loading under fatigue, and that can result in injury. So I'll say that would be one of the benefits, is that it gives you the ability to pace during your CrossFit workouts that are based off of you. So, say for example, if you're doing a running test or a little bit of running into some wall balls, into some like barbell cycling, into some C2 bike erg, and we do the VO2 max test on a bike erg, then we know exactly what power outputs and what heart rates you should be hitting on that bike erg in order to maintain the proper pace for whatever time is targeted for that workout. I'll also say this, that VO2 max testing can be really beneficial even for weightlifters, for example, because weightlifters have a tendency to maybe neglect cardiovascular exercise, so cardio. And
I call it weightlifting cardio when you do anything over like 8 reps, right? Yeah.
Yeah, 8 to 12 reps in you breathing hard is not cardio. I'm sorry to say it. If it is, then you should probably do a little bit extra cardio, because having a strong cardiovascular system is going to help you with recovery, which is then going to allow you to accumulate more volume within your lifts. Accumulating more volume is then going to allow you to be stronger. But it's also going to give you an indication, is my VO2 max too low? Because it can be dangerous for you to live with a VO2 max that is too low. And the good news is that you can improve that. Like, until the day you die, you have the ability to expand and contract that house, that physiological house that I was talking about earlier.
Yeah, just for a use case for myself, one thing that was really beneficial, you talked about doing the VO2 max on the bike erg, just understanding what my heart rate was supposed to feel like in that threshold was really beneficial going into like a 20-minute workout or like a 40-minute workout, just to kind of know like now if I look down at my watch, look at my Garmin watch and I'm at 172, I'm probably gonna have to stop
Hmm.
because I'm gonna be have my hands on my knees panting,
Hmm.
or it tells me to slow down a little bit so I can continue, even though it's still hard to be at like 165
Hmm.
for a sustained time. If I stay under that, like it was good information for me to continue to pace a program or a workout. So I'd say that for me, that was a really good um, exercise to understand how I was feeling and what
Yeah.
was okay to
Yeah.
feel
That's
like.
actually, yeah, that's a perfect example. I just did a race up in Washington, and it was going to be anywhere from 30 to 50 minutes. But because I had done the physiological testing and figured out what my sustainable heart rate was for 30 to 50 minutes, it was around 164 to 168. I knew exactly what pacing I or what heart rate I should be targeting while running up this mountain. And it allowed me to kind of optimize how fast, I actually did that workout on that day because, like temperature changes, like fatigue levels change,
Sure.
hydration levels change, all that sort of stuff that's going to affect how fast you can do something. But especially with like kind of those events that are less than 60 minutes, if you know what heart rate to target, then that's a really good indicator of like, okay, if I'm at 168, I know I could only go above 168 for about 5 minutes or something like that. So that's going to be like the very end of the
Right.
race where I can like kind of surge to the finish line.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm smiling right now. I don't know if you're getting echoing. I was getting like you were robot talking and I was
Oh,
trying to stay with you.
no, I was not hearing any robot talking at all.
Okay, cool. Well, I'll do my best to finish this up with a straight face. Anything else you'd like to add? I know you're going to be around the office more here and there. You're going to be doing a talk, or at least kind of like a little bit of a presentation on
Hmm.
the benefits of physiologic testing. And then you'll be probably doing a physiologic test on somebody, maybe Tanner or
Hmm.
somebody, or maybe a participant that shows up
Yeah.
for Dr. Phil's talk.
Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe you should show up. Um, but yeah, I don't have anything else I want to talk about. I know whenever we talk, it ends up being an hour to 2 hours longer than we were expecting.
I know.
I'm a, I myself was going to go into a PhD exercise physiology route, and I decided not to. Decided to go to PT, but there's that still lives in me that I want to be an exercise physiologist. So Phil, where can anybody find you? How can
Yeah.
they get a hold of you?
Yeah. So if any of this stuff, sounds interesting to you, I live in the Bend area. So, and I can travel, to do testing, and, it doesn't just have to be, like signed up through the clinic. You can just, let me know, and then, we can coordinate from
For
there.
sure.
But the best place to reach me is just on Instagram, at Dr. Phil Batterson. So Dr. Phil Batterson. Or you can email me batterson.phil@gmail.com and just say, like I'm just responding to the video that you and Scott Johnson did. And then, we can talk from there. I can give you more information, those sort of things if you're interested in it.
Sweet. Well, there you have it. Thanks, Dr. Phil. I can't wait to have more in-depth talks with you in the near future and kind of share some knowledge with the folks.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for having me on, Scott. I look forward to connecting with everybody, and don't miss like the in-person demo. If you've never heard of physiological testing or VO2 max testing, it's definitely a spectacle, and there's a lot to be learned from the type of testing that I do. So look forward to, you know, something like that demo. It'll be completely free, and you might be a lucky one that actually gets a free VO2 max test out of it, and then you'll kind of get the whole spiel of exactly like what I walked everybody through today, except with like the numbers and, you know, what my recommendations would be.
Sweet. And Dr. Phil, also you do online coaching as well?
Yeah. So I'm primarily an endurance coach. I focus on runners and mountain bikers, but I've coached anybody from road runners, road cyclists, triathletes, really just anybody who's interested in kind of taking advantage of this physiological testing to get the most out of, you know, their training and then optimizing their health at the same time.
Awesome. I got nothing else for you, sir.
Awesome.
Looking forward to chatting in the near future.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for having me on.
Yep. See ya.
See ya.